The House overwhelmingly passing funding for Israel's Iron Dome. 420-9 was the final vote, so extremely bipartisan. But this only happened after the funding was removed from a bill to prevent a government shutdown. But that controversy remains. For more, let's bring in the former chief of staff of the National Security Council and former CIA analyst Fred Fleitz, and the managing director of the Coalition for Jewish Values, Rabbi Yaakov Menken. Gentlemen, good morning. So nice to have you on the show.
Thank you for having us. Good morning.
Rabbi Menken, I'd like to start with you, and I want to update our viewers kind of on what's going on here. So this $1 billion, which when you're talking about $4 trillion is absolutely nothing, but this $1 billion was initially allocated for the Israeli aerial defense system, included in what they call must-pass legislation. The House considered that legislation earlier this week, but a group of progressive members of the House, Democrats, namely Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ilhan Omar, all pushed to block the funding, basically saying that they don't care about the fate of innocent Israeli civilians. And you tweeted a very strong response. Tell us about that.
Well, I think I simply said it as it is. The Iron Dome is exclusively a defensive system. No matter what lies they say about Israel, the fact is that innocent children should not be subject to being terrorized and being murdered. Nobody argued that South African children, white children, should be murdered because their parents were being racist towards the black community in South Africa. So with all of their lies about apartheid, the idea that that would justify murder, justify homicide, the entire purpose of Iron Dome was to stop missiles fired by Hamas, each one of which is a war crime,
right,
from reaching Israeli children. And of course, it was protecting Palestinian lives also.
Yeah, and this is not just...
This whole concept, the idea that this is the funding you want to block, is the most anti-humanitarian, anti-decency measures you could imagine.
Yeah, we had this video that we've played all morning of AOC crying on the House floor after the bipartisan vote passed overwhelmingly, 420-9. John Schneider brought up a good point. She was probably putting herself in front of the camera on purpose. I don't understand what she's crying about here. I had to check with my producers to make sure this was in fact the right bill, because why would you cry? This is about saving lives. 4,600 times, Fred, the Israelis had to fire the Iron Dome defense system to block those Hamas rockets this spring. 4,600 times, which is why the system needs to be replenished, which is why they need this $1 billion. I wanted to get your reaction to the bill, which now will move to the Senate. So House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer brought a separate bill to the House floor yesterday under suspension, which means that it bypassed the normal rules to pass, which requires 2/3 majority. Take a listen, and then we'll get reaction.
We bring this bill to the floor with the expectation that it will be overwhelmingly passed, because we will put behind us partisanship. Support for Israel has traditionally and must always be a bipartisan issue. That's because we overwhelmingly recognize the fundamental right of the Jewish people to live independently in their ancestral homeland and to do so in peace and in security.
Rabbi Menken, I'm going to ask you the question while we check on Fred Fleitz's audio, but shouldn't he have also included, and we want to get rid of anti-Semitism within the Democratic Party?
Well, he should have said that, but he couldn't say that, unfortunately. I mean, it was very brave that they went forward and did this, because it was a very much needed repudiation of the squad without saying so. But it would be so much better if they actually did say so.
Yeah.
That, something like calling Israel an apartheid state. Israel's the only government in the region that isn't exclusively Arab. So when that's the one they call apartheid, something else is going on.
Rabbi Menken, we at Newsmax, I think one of the things that separates us from the other networks in the competition is, I'm just going to try to say it like it is, the way that I see it. But if you vote against a bill like this, and again, it's $1 billion, which is nothing when you're talking about $3.5 trillion in that debacle of an infrastructure bill. But if you vote against this bill, are you voting? You're voting in favor of Palestinians, Arabs, and yes, the Jewish population in Israel. You're condemning them to death.
Oh, absolutely. The result
that
of
simple.
not having Iron Dome would be that more innocent Israelis were murdered, which would require stronger reprisals, which would require more Arab fighters to be killed in various reprisal actions, which would simply spur further violence. The whole point of Iron Dome is it is a completely non-aggressive defensive mechanism designed to neutralize war crimes and neutralize terrorism. It's hard to, I mean, what I said in my tweet, I back fully. 70 years ago, we called these people Nazis. Now we call them the Squad.
That's such a good point. Yaakov Menken, it's such a good point. Also, our silent American president, Joe Biden, has yet to weigh in. He should have just said, listen, this $1 billion has to be a part of this bill. This is our only ally in the Middle East and our longest standing ally. Rabbi Menken, such a pleasure having you on. We appreciate it. And I'd like to say also, because we had you on last week, enjoy your Sukkot, which I think I'm saying properly.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, you did pretty well with that one. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rabbi. Good to see you. We'll see you again soon. All right, coming up on Wake Up.